Hola, soy Inés López Quesada, cofundadora de la Galería Travesía 4 y os queremos dar la bienvenida al tercer capítulo de Bajo el Sol y agradecer otra vez a la Fundación El Secreto de la Filantropía por su apoyo y por hacerlo posible. En esta ocasión vamos a tener el privilegio de escuchar a Munir Fasheh, que es un matemático palestino que durante los últimos 40 años se ha dedicado a desmantelar los pilares del sistema de educación académica y evidenciar el rol histórico que ha tenido como herramienta de colonización. Su trabajo como agitador cultural pone en el centro el aprendizaje muyaragua, que es el aprendizaje espontáneo a través de la experiencia directa de la vida y en comunidad. Asuncio Molinos Gordo es un artista visual, nació en un pequeño pueblo de Burgos en 1979 y forma parte del programa de Travesía 4. Espero que disfrutéis de este encuentro. Bienvenida Asun, bienvenido Munir, muchísimas gracias por vuestra participación y espero que lo disfrutéis.
Thank you. Thank you, Inés. Thank you, Bajo el Sol and Travesía 4 for hosting us today. And thank you very much, Munir Fasheh. It's a great pleasure to be interviewing you today. And yeah, for everybody to know a bit about your background, I will do a formal introduction, and excuse me all because I'm just gonna read it. And I would like to all know about Munir and his career, what he has been doing, and a bit of his background. So Munir was born in Jerusalem in Palestine in 1941. He studied and taught math for many years in Birzeit University. Got his master's in mathematics from Florida State University and his doctorate in education from Harvard University. During the first Palestinian Intifada in the 80s, he left academia and established Tamer Institute for Community Education, which revolved around protecting, providing learning environments building on what's beautiful, inspiring, healthy, and abundant in people, communities, and cultures, and making sense of one's experience. In 1997, he established the Arab Education Forum within Harvard University Center for the Middle Eastern Studies, and currently he's working on establishing a college called Home of Wisdom in Palestinian universities and probably in many other places. So thank you, Munir, for being here with us today.
And thank you for inviting me to this wonderful gathering with a wonderful vision.
Thank you.
And as I understand the vision, it's like, again, how our knowledges and our wisdoms and so on can be recognized worldwide, but especially by the Western world. So here I want really to start with two stories. A friend of mine, Alan Bishop, who is a British and was teaching geometry in Cambridge University, then in Melbourne, and he was very interested in how people see their space around, how they relate to it. And he used to go to places and ask them questions. One of the places he went to was Central Australia with the Aborigines. And he stayed with a friend there. And he asked him, suppose that you start walking in the desert and then you get lost. What do? He said, I go back home. He said, I'm telling you, you get lost. He said, yes, if I get lost, I go back home. So Alan was so surprised. I mean, what is he talking about? Then he realized that in a place like London, if you are lost, or in the modern world, if you are lost, you don't know how to go on and you don't know how to go back. But somebody who is rooted in a place, rooted in a culture, rooted will never find difficulty to go back home. And this is actually what happened to me in many ways, including education, and in particular, mathematics. In 2007, there was a conference in UNESCO Paris about intercultural dialogue, and they invited me to go. In the paper that they sent us, the concept paper that they sent us, that was written by a French philosopher, He said the eternal problem is the relationship between one and the many. So when I started writing about a response to that, I said, in my culture, I never felt I was one, and I never really felt I was many or relating to many. The two words that we have in Arabic instead of these is muthanna. Now, muthanna is two. And even the word for a human being is insan. Insan is two people, which means every one of us comes from two people. So, so it really defies to start with one. And instead of many, we have the word mujawara. Mujawara is always made of people who want to be together. I mean, like a family. It starts with a family. So we are never, with many. No, we are with people that we know, that we are related to, and so this way, we are in a way more equipped for the future, because the present time is really so bad. Everybody is feeling it so bad. But we who come from the south and the east and places that are called underdeveloped, we know how to go back, and we have something to go back to. Somebody like that philosopher, or like Alan Bishop, they don't know how to go back to because they lost that connection. So here, what I really want to say is that when somebody says we really have to catch up with the West, or we want the West to recognize our knowledges, I think this is the wrong approach. What we have to do is to really have, again, our knowledge as a reference, our cultures as a reference, our civilizations as a reference, and maybe, hopefully, the West will catch up with us and find some reference to their problems. Because, I mean, probably still Europe has much more connection to the past than the US. The US and Canada do not. And their only past is the past that they totally wiped out in the Americas. So I wanted really to start with this because I want to really stress many things that are so crucial in today's world. And now in mathematics, for example, the big earthquake that happened in my mind was when I discovered that my mother, who does not know the alphabet, was using and practicing mathematics that cannot be understood by me or by the emperors of math, like Russell and all the others. And the difference was, I studied, for example, geometry, starting with points, straight lines, geometric figures, plane geometry, etc. And then came what they call applications in life. So my starting point is something that is abstract. And while my mother started with the bodies of women, because she was a seamstress. So I said, wow, I mean, I said, the difference is I start with something that does not have meaning. It's never part of my life. Nobody ever saw a point, because it was defined as a geometric concept that has no length, no width, no height. And then, of course, we put it on a board with a chalk, and it has everything. It has length, and the idea is the mathematics I studied did not have meaning and did not have context. My mother started with real things, a woman's body. Then the other thing about her math and my math, her math did not need Descartes, did not need Euclid, did not need all these people who really put theorems and theories about geometry and so on. And she was able to deal with the most difficult geometry, most complicated geometry, women's bodies. How did she do it? In my opinion, she did it because her knowledge came through her fingers and her imagination and reality. This connection between reality, fingers, and imagination, and connecting all of these into an understanding that cannot be put in modern words, in modern theories. So what I really want to say here is that the big problem is that we have been denied to understand. And we always built our knowledge and our understanding on what came from what they call developed countries that had theorems and theories and always feeling they are superior. So I saw that my mother was really superior, not in the sense she is better, but her world is different. She was superior in her connection to the world, to reality, to what she has as a human being, imagination, fingers, all these things that are totally wiped out. And if they are used as applications.
Absolutely. I mean, this is one of the things that I could not agree more. And this was also the feeling that I had when I first moved to Egypt and I traveled to Jordan and I visit Palestine. The whole thing about, guys, this is the future. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, these guys are ahead of us. You know, they are really, really ahead precisely because of the connection with the past and the very strong feeling that these places were still alive because the connection that you describe now, that your mother had, everybody kind of had. And also I was witnessing this back home, like the place where I come from, you know, like it's Europe, is one of these developed countries, is Spain, whatever. But we are in the periphery of Spain. We were in the rural Spain, you know, the places where still people produce knowledge in the same manner that you described that your mother does, you know, with her own intelligence, her own, you know, ability to observe, to pay attention, to be in contact with life, and then through their handwork. So one of the things I remember when I first heard about your work, it was like when I visited Jordan in 2015 to take part in the spring sessions. You know, when Noura Al-Hassaouni and Tolin Tuk invited me there, I remember I was giving this workshop about like pensamiento campesino, peasant thinking. And I kept saying, you know, like, you know, farmers are knowledge producers, they do it this way and blah, blah. And everybody kept saying, you're saying the same things as Munir. You have to talk to Munir. You have to meet Munir. And then it was later in 2018, you know, when I came back also for the spring sessions, again with Noura and Tolin. And then I met Rif Ahuri, and then she, you know, and her, we didn't stop talking about you. And again, you know, like little by little, you know, I got to access your papers. And then the first thing that I heard from you was the TED Talk in Ramallah, the one that talks about the occupation of knowledge. And that was like a milestone for me, you know, because it really, you put words to everything that for me at the time was only a feeling. You know, I had the intuitions that things were this way. You know, I had the intuition that, yes, you know, like education is something that is creating more of a barrier rather than a bonding, but you put it in words. And I remember one of the first things that it was a blessing for me, really, was when you used the word modern superstition. Precisely because, you know, those in underdeveloped countries or like in rural areas in other parts of the world, we keep having this stigma of we are the ones who have superstitions. You know what I mean? Like we are the ones who do magical things or like believe in like the moon and do weird things. and our knowledge production is never being recognized or credited. And then when you reverse it and you said, no, listen, these guys are the ones who have superstitions, you know, the modern superstitions. So I don't know if you would like to tell us a bit more about how you came to take the decision on using the word superstition to talk about the things that your friend were referring to. You know, it's not universal that everybody understands the same meaning of lost when you're lost, you know, or geometry or space. So these are not like universal. And how come, you know, like the first world countries have managed to convince everybody that our cultural bias is universal and is what we have to all follow. So I don't know. I mean, when you said the word superstition, for me, it was really a blessing. It's like, alhamdulillah, you know, thank you.
Okay. The first superstition that I want to mention is what we teach in math as a universal truth, 1 equals 1. In life, I never met 1 equals 1 in any case unless it is insignificant. For example, I put $1 on my hand, in my hand, and 3/4 in my other hand, and then I can say this paper, $1 is equal to the 4/4. Very, very insignificant. But no one goes to a vegetable place and applies that. For example, anyone who goes into a vegetable place will never apply 1 apple is equal to 1 apple. The person starts looking at the apples and choosing, right? So 1 apple equals 1 apple is not practiced. So it is a myth that I feel that really relates to what the West used to control the world and have hegemony, which is, oh, the West believes in eternal truths, and you know, but useless. They have no meaning. There is no. When we teach without meaning, we are doing a crime to children. When we tell them 1 equals 1, and then if they see, you know, like an apple here and a sheep here is 1 and here is 1. They are not equal. That doesn't even mean anything. So 1 is equal to 1. When it is like imposing this eternal truth, this universal truth on the minds, so that we felt, oh, I mean, you know, mathematics that comes from England and from France and from Germany and whatever, they really prove things in abstraction. Bertrand Russell and Alfred North Whitehead spent a long time and 300 pages to prove logically that 1 + 1 is equal to 2. And I used, probably you know my story, I used to take to schools when I worked in the 70s with children, and I have an eye drop that has water. So I put 1 drop on the table. I say, how many drops? 1. I put another drop on the over the first one. I said, I added another drop. How many drops do you see? They get confused. And they, you know, but then they say, oh, but the new drop is bigger. So I said, we can put a bigger one, you know, just, you know, if it is, but it's still 1 drop. And then I asked them, are you going to believe your eyes? Or you are going to believe Bertrand Russell? You have a choice. If you believe your eyes, then you are a human being, acting as human. But if you want to, you know, believe Bertrand Russell, then you are in a big problem. You know. I mean, I love Bertrand Russell. He was the first European that was like a reference to me. And I read a lot of books, social, political, and mathematical. I think in the political level, he was much more honest.
Mhm.
He was put in jail because of Vietnam. And he was criticized a lot because of his support to Palestinians. But no one really either paid a price or really was very happy that he proved 1 + 1 = 2. Then I say, okay, if we put an expert and next to the expert a donkey, these are two what? 2 donkeys or 2 experts? So what does it mean 1 + 1 = 2? So I'm talking now about superstitions that they seem so innocent, but they are actually the root of hegemony. When the British came to Palestine and they brought their matriculation, and their matriculation, the test, the examination at the end of the school cycle. And at the beginning, the schools in Palestine, in Jordan, and other places had this reference to really say whether they are worthy human beings or not. So they answer the questions that are sent from London, and then their papers go back to London, and that are corrected or evaluated without really knowing the people, without knowing the context, without having any meaning, without anything. But they will decide our worth. So the linear vertical evaluation is not only a myth, but is a crime against human beings at the age of 16 or 17 or 18 or even before. But at this age, they are given a certificate whether they have passed or failed. And in Jordan and Palestine, somewhere between 30 and 40% every year are given certificates by the ministries of education, who really tell 30 to 40% of the students who sat for the test are failures. Imagine somebody at the age of 17 or 18 is given a certificate by a government telling them you are nothing. And those who pass, of course, are not better because they are deceived that they know, but all what they know, mainly either technical stuff or they are very good as parrots.
Yeah.
I was a parrot in my school years and in my first 4 years and then 2 years masters. I parroted the mathematics that was given to me. I accepted it. And because they said, oh, I am intelligent and all that garbage, somehow I believed that, wow, I'm really better than others. No, I was a parrot. I was better as a parrot. So, since the 70s, I always stressed to people, don't accept anything without meaning. And usually meaning comes from your experience and making sense of that experience. So don't ever lose your right to make sense. You are a source of meaning. Never forget this. And your meaning can never be compared because your meaning depends on your experiences, on reflection, and on making sense out of it.
Absolutely.
So, there are so many other superstitions. So I would encourage listeners to think of the superstitions that they live and think that they are good. The CV is a superstition.
Yeah.
The CV never tells about us. The CV always tells about the institutions that we have related to. We are not there. In the CV, we are not there, except maybe where we are born and our age. but the rest is institutions. I'm not there. In Arabic, we translated CV into life journey, which is much better. But our under life journey, we copy the West. We put the institutions, which is again a way of deceiving or deceit and corruption of one's knowing oneself.
Yeah, exactly. No, and the thing is, these superstitions that you're mentioning, and also these abstract ideas, is just a way of impoverishing, because the only way you can deal with an abstraction, you know, like a point or a line or whatever, or you were saying the 1 = 1, is by removing other forms of knowledge or other ideas of other visions. No, when you were talking about 1 apple = 1 apple. So when you go to the market and you choose one over the other, is because there are a lot of other information that you are considering, like the state of that apple, the smell of the apple, how does it feel in your hand, when was it harvest? So all of this other information, it gets removed and then it gets simplified, and then yes, you can in 300 pages, you know, explain or justify that 1 = 1. So the whole thing is this collection of superstition are making our world poorer, because there's less and less and less information that we are taking into account. Because the more information, the more complexity, the less radical actions we can take. So when somebody, you know, decides to go to war, or decides to fail a student, or decides to, you know, create a weapon, or decides to do any of these things, is only by removing probably 90% of the information, because otherwise you cannot make radical choices. You cannot say something as radical as 1 = 1, and you can say something as radical as this student has failed. And it's just even more, I mean, is so direct, you know, the connection that you have been always exploring between education and colonialism. I mean, the example that you gave us just now about even sending the exams to the foreign country, you know, like to see whether the experts there could, you know, like pass the student or fail the student. I mean, it's just insane. And I remember very well, like one of the very captivating things from the first time I was listening to you was this whole idea about watch out with the colonization of the mind. You know, that's the worst form of colonialism, is colonization, you know, colonization. But also, you know, how colonization is in sync with impoverishing. So what is happening to all of the countries that have been colonized by the imperial powers? They have been getting poorer, but not just in the very basic, you know, and obvious things like resources. They don't have the gold that they used to have, or they don't have, you know, the precious minerals or whatever. But also their people have been drained from, you know, like the dignity and their self-esteem, you know, because if there is something that is very strong that I see in Palestine, and I see in Egypt, and I see in Jordan, and I see in many places that I still see that they are alive, is this whole thing that despite the fact that, you know, like you have been having these international communities, you know, pointing at you and saying you are underdeveloped, you're not there yet, always also locking you in a time frame, like you're locked in the past, and you know, the future is still ahead of you, and you haven't, you know, like all of these promises of, you know, playing with the time frame of like past and future, despite the fact that you have been bombarded with all of these insults in a way, and we have been bombarded the same way, because in the rural places in Spain, we have the same, you know, I mean, I could completely connect the two places because they have been sabotaged in the same manner, you know, the promise of development, the promise of technology and stuff. Despite the fact that all of these things have been happening in all of these territories, still there's something that remains. There is this small and still precious, you know, self-esteem or dignity of the people who still have a very strong intuition and are capable to break through, you know, like the superstitions. And being able to, at the end, as you were telling to your students, is like, okay, you believe your eye or you believe the expert. So, I mean, these are very strong triggers. And yeah, I mean, I'm just like, at this point, so happy and so thankful for your generosity. Yeah.
You know, when, to me, the West superstition is related to education. But education was related also to a previous superstition which is also related to Palestine, when Rome hijacked the Palestinian Christ from their hearts and homes of Palestinian Christians and put him on a pedestal to go and wipe out 3 continents in his name. I mean, the corruption of Jesus is the most difficult thing, but Europe succeeded in doing that. And right now, I am from my family, who probably became Christian since Jesus was walking on this land. I am the last male in my family who lives in Palestine. And I have a sister and I have a cousin, female. Once the 3 of us die, our family stops being in Palestine, although it has been. So the first colonization was the colonization of Christianity. They took the Jesus of Palestine and made him a like a servant to the empire. And if we look at the new empire, with Trump and Bush and all of that, they all carried the Bible, the gospel, and claimed they are really, guided by that. Now I want to go to education. Now in education, there are 2 fathers of the education. One of them is Spanish, actually, who is Nebrija. But Nebrija did not succeed with Isabella. So Isabella did not accept his colonizing knowledge, because it was such a strange idea that he wanted to control children and everybody to know only one language, official language, royal language, and nothing else. So they will all speak the same thing and have the same meanings. As I said, Isabella was still respecting people enough not to accept his offer. But the second one, after 100 years from Nebrija, is Comenius. Comenius, who is a Czech. And he is the one who is considered the father of modern education right now, because his ideas are the dominant ones. And the main idea he has is a superstition. He said, those who learn without being taught are closer to animals than to men. These are his words. It is a superstition that we cannot learn without being taught. So, for example, my mother, who learned without being taught, and her math was so more complicated, so much more beautiful. She made dresses. And so she is closer, according to Comenius, the father of education, modern education, she is closer to animals than to men. And so to me, these ideas are very crucial. And for some obvious reason, they are not included in schools of education, because they really expose the exact nature of education, that it is something that should be controlled by institutions and professionals, and you cannot learn it from life. And if you learn it from life, you are like an animal and not a human being. And it is still going on in a place like Palestine and like Jordan and like India and everywhere else. We are still slaves to this superstition that whatever we learn, which does not come with a certificate from an institution, it's not recognized as knowledge. And this is, like what you were saying about agriculture. A person who has been involved in dealing with soil and with trees and with animals and life and nature and weather and all of that, that person that person's knowledge is not considered.
Mhm.
A person who spends 4 years in a university studying agriculture becomes a minister of agriculture. But that is when I said, I see hope in today's world, because many of these myths are slowly becoming really what they are. They are myths to control.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and also the thing is like how still they are holding in place, because I mean, I've seen like situations, for instance, where my father, who was a farmer, he also had extended knowledge on mechanics and mathematics, but applied to machinery. So the thing is, there was this occasion where he bought a plow, you know, to plow the land, and he bought it from the factory, and he didn't like it, and he started changing it. So he started cutting it into pieces, welding things in place, blah blah, and making it much better and much more efficient, until the point that even the entire village was betting whether the tractor was going to be powerful enough to lift it. But my father has done the calculation in his way, because he didn't also finish graduate school or nothing. I mean, I think he probably cheated every exam he attended, but he still was managed to do that. So the thing is, when the engineer came to see what my father has made out of the thing he bought from him, he was so shocked, but he was not able to recognize. You know, it's like, oh, he treated like an anecdote. It's like something magical, or something like it was just an accident, or like a casualty, you know, something like, it's not that this man actually developed a better machine than the one you sold in the first place. And not only that he didn't recognize it, but also he started taking pictures, and he took pictures of all of, you know, these new things that my father had done to the sculpture that he created. And he sent these pictures back to the factory. And the factory implemented everything, every one of my dad's ideas, without recognizing them, without, of course, paying for anything, which in any other context, this is called industrial spying, espionaje industrial, you know, industrial spying. So, and this has been happening in real life. You know, you got people into John Deere or into the factory of like New Holland or any of these, you know, like big machinery producers for big farmers. And they get people inside just to sneak in and, you know, get all of this information and then distribute it. So my father, you know, he managed to do all of these things, and it wasn't credit or recognized or anything in any way. Not even the guy acknowledged it. He just, you know, still stole from it his ideas and his things, implemented, and never came to the village again, just in case.
Did you write the story?
No. I told the story.
I think it is a beautiful, beautiful story.
Yeah.
And it can go with my mother's story, and again regain learning without being taught.
Absolutely, yes.
The power of learning without being taught.
Yeah.
You know, part of my hope also is Corona, because Corona proved how obsolete are schools and universities. In 1.5 years, they couldn't come with any idea outside their cage, which is they wanted to finish the curriculum. The curriculum brings them to heaven. The academia, they went on teaching maybe just some technical skills, because they couldn't close the universities. How are they going to get the money to pay their teachers? So they had all this myth that they are teaching. At least in schools, children are together, they meet each other, they play with each other, and they learn from each other. With distant learning, they lost even that only good stuff in schools and universities. So Corona exposed these two huge institutions that have been in place at least since 400 years, and is really should, at least those who see that fallacy, to start thinking of ways, of words, of meanings, of visions that are different. So to me, the vision that I have been working with since the 70s without completely realizing that what I was doing is totally different, is built on, the vision is built on 3 legs. One is mujawara, which is people learn in groups. There is honesty. There is no evaluation from inside. There is no authority from outside. So mujawara is people learning together. Like, I mean, many musical groups, they don't go to a musical school. They start as, 4 or 5 when they are young, and they go on playing together, and then they become very good at it. The second leg is well-being as a value. Now, well-being is totally crushed in modern world at every level. And they change it to health, which is connected to institutions. So health and well-being are 2 different things, totally. Well-being is your responsibility. Health is, most of the time, is a robber. They rob people of what they can do by themselves. Healing can be done by the person. And the third leg in the vision I have been working with for about actually for 50 years, since 1971, after the 1967 war, where I became totally against education and started my own way. The third leg is that learning that does not come or spring from a soil is a plastic knowledge. The soil, the first soil, of course, is the earth soil. But then there is the cultural soil. There is the community soil. And there is the heart soil. The heart, the soul. So these are, how can all education, one go through 12 years, then another 4 years, then another who knows how many years, and say they are learning, and not any of them is related to a soil. So the idea of these 3, the mujawara, communal learning, the wellness as the value, and the soils as the substance, where we learn from.
Yeah, this is also something that worries me a lot, because I see that more and more people come into this world away from the 3 soils, like a lot of children are coming today, are being born in captivity, in big cities, detached, not embedded in any community, from institution to institution, from kindergarten to school to university to something. Everything is being outsourced. Nobody is being provided like by the community, the neighbors or the family or anything. And once you grow like in this completely detachment, in this like of synthetic world, synthetic cultural world, where you are not embedded in any of the 3 soils, is there any way back into them? You know what I mean? It's like, like all of these young generations of children, that are now, being born like this week or in the last, like 10 years, in these big cities or in countries that are very broken, not broken through war, but broken, socially broken, fragmented. Everybody's scared of each other. I don't know, there's no community and stuff. I mean, how they can be, I mean, is there a way, because I always think about, okay, we are growing in captivity the same way that some animals are being growing in captivity in the zoos, like suddenly you bring a lion into a zoo or whatever, and the lion doesn't know how to eat, how to sleep. He cannot even have children because he doesn't have like a sexual appetite or anything. So, I mean, I know that we as animals than we are, once we are being disconnected and not in contact, I don't know if there is some kind of like way back into that. I really wonder, like, in one way, you and me, I had the blessing to come from very strong communities. Okay, yes, they are affected by war scenarios, by colonialism, by occupation, by all kinds of things that we want to talk about, by modernity, but we have this connection. But I mean, if you don't have access to it, what happens, to these people? I mean, how can, I don't know, is there is any way into?
Maybe what I can do is send like about 7 or 8 pages that I wrote when I was in Istanbul, talking about education and all of that with others, learning it. That I really tell my story from 1971 about how these 3 were part of my work. And what I found out is that because they are so simple and everybody feels them. I mean, when you tell them you can learn from the community, from friends, from family, from people who do things, and you learn with them. And that wellness is what is important. It is the most important thing. If you are not well, everything falls apart. And wellness does not come from institutions. Avoid medicine as much as possible. Avoid doctors as much as possible. Go only in very few cases where you have to. And then learning collectively or communally and from all kinds of soils and all of that. So I say, reclaim what you can do by yourself. And the first thing you can do by yourself is you are a source of meaning. To me, I keep repeating this. I started it with in the 70s. You are a source of meaning. And the first thing that I did in the 70s, when I used to go to schools and talk with children, one of the questions that I used was, what is a point for you? What is a point? And the girl, something like 7 years old, was the best answer. She said, a circle without a hole. When the hole disappears, the circle becomes a point. What an imagination. I never heard it from all those emperors who teach geometry or deal with geometry, engineering, etc. A point is a circle without a hole. When the hole disappears. I mean, so when she said that, and every child is able, it does it all the time, making sense, making meaning. We don't recognize it. We don't build on it. We are totally blind to this very basic aspect of learning, of being a human, fully human, that no one can control you. Oh, your meaning is wrong. It is not wrong because I'm giving you the meaning from my experience and my reflection. And what is your meaning? Does it come from a soil and from reflection, or because you read it in a textbook or an academic book? So these simple ideas is our way into the future. What people can do by themselves without needing any control, any institution. Now, institutions are needed in technical matters. We need them. We need universities in technical matters. Somebody to operate on my body and does a good work when my body somehow is corrupted, is wrong, there's something wrong, that's fine. As long as we are in the technical world, maybe we need institutions, knowledge that deals with that. But in life, if your son or daughter is feeling depressed, the worst thing is to take them to a professional who knows theories and knows concepts, but doesn't know children. At least doesn't know your child. As if your child is a universal child. The answer can apply to any child in the world. So this is what we have to remind each other of. Yes. And that's why I think the story of your father is a very, very beautiful story. And it will encourage others also to start really seeing what their parents and what people who do not know the alphabet, they know a lot that cannot, because they cannot be put in our words, that we think they don't have knowledge. But they have a knowledge that cannot be put in theories and in categories or institutional words.
Yes. No, absolutely. I mean, and this is very powerful, what you're saying about the whole thing about being the co-author of meaning and being the source of meaning. Because I remember Review and me, we were having another conversation, and she was saying, because when you talk from your experience, nothing can be, no argument is valid, you know, because where you're talking about ideas, not ideas, but, you know, theory or things that have been put in books and stuff, there are a lot of arguments that they can take place. But when you talk from your own perspective, nobody can really confront that with any kind of argument, because you're talking from a point of view that is not debatable.
Exactly.
So I think this is the strongest element in you know, in your idea about us being like sources of meaning and sources of knowledge and co-authors of meaning, is the whole thing that is not debatable. So
Exactly.
If I think this way about this subject, end of the story, you know what I mean? So it's also like another way of empowering and also reversing the hegemony towards, you know, the colonization of our minds.
It is the source of dignity.
Yeah.
It is the source of dignity when you control, not control in the sense of controlling as much as you are a source, you are a co-author of meaning. Once you have that, I mean, it is so amazing how feeling sense of worth.
Yep. Exactly.
Because you are not going to be easily deceived by telling you the experts say this is how you learn, and this is worth learning, and this is your worthiness, and all of that. You become, you and the communal groups that you work with. Yes. You together become a source, a basis that will protect you all from the garbage that comes with institutional words and academic categories. Yes. I mean, when I really remember that I studied mathematics as a specialization. What did I mean, how can you study? It's like, I mean, you know, like you are a nutritionist and you know everything about the salt. But you never see the salt in food. So I know about mathematics. I never really saw it in life. If I tell you the courses, I mean, let me tell you if there is time, just the courses I studied and dealt with.
Yes.
Let me see if I can. It is unbelievable. I mean, right now, for example, I read them and I say, what did I do all these years thinking that I'm intelligent? And I didn't know anything. You know, the courses that I studied and taught, some of them, differential equations, introduction to linear algebra, mathematical statistics, complex variables, discrete mathematics, topics in algebra, numerical analysis, theory of numbers, topology, probability. And this is,
wow.
Nothing there is part of me inside, is part of my way of living, my lifestyle. They remained outside. It's like something that I brought from Western universities or local that do the same thing and sold them to students. I was a merchant. And not only a merchant, I was a colonialist, a knowledge colonialist without knowing it. My weapon as a colonialist was math, was the European math, European American math. So I was, I mean, when I discovered really that I was a knowledge colonialist, how can this really pass by without noticing it when it was happening? Again, it was my mother, the main thing, and the Palestinian situation that pulled me out, unplugged me from
Yeah.
this garbage.
Yeah, no, because they really mastered the whole thing about indirect ruling through education. They were ruling without being there, just through the institutions. So they truly mastered it till the point that, you know, there was this sense of faith and belief that that was the right thing to do.
So as Spanish, do you know, are you familiar with Nebrija or not?
Yes, we even have a university here called Nebrija. So there's a sense
but
of
probably
pride
you don't
also.
know how the impact, I mean, what I understand is that he is considered the father of Spanish education. He is thought of very highly, although he was, to my understanding, I mean, a destroyer of learning.
Yeah.
But again, it is something for you to figure out what
No,
he has
yeah,
done.
yeah. No, the thing is, here in Spain, our main figures and, you know, the names of the people in the plates of the streets or in the monuments of our streets and stuff like this, pretty much they're all very problematic for a completely different set of reasons. So yeah, I mean, many of the artists are really revisiting, you know, whether our urbanists and, you know, like politicians should really figure out all of the attributes to all of the different like criminals, you know, that we are, you know, like giving all of this space and monuments and things like this. So yeah, this is work that it needs to be done of reconsidering our own story, but from a different point of view. I don't know. Yeah, I was just thinking you know, like when we need to think about like in which kind of areas people are a little bit, because I mean, me as an artist and many of the musicians that I know, or the actors and stuff, we are still kind of like, many of the artists that I know never attended university, and they are still artists and they still manage to do a career because there's still some human knowledge production that is kind of escape this validation system. Although, of course, an artist who attended, you know, Bard College is gonna do much, much better, or like Goldsmith, who's someone who didn't. I mean, not in every case, but, you know, there is this validation system, but still, nevertheless, within music, within the arts, within all, you know, like dancing and all of these things, although there are institutions, I think there's still like a crack. I always feel like there are cracks in these areas of expertise that other people like me, you know, can sneak in, you know, like go through the crack, coming from a different background where me as a kid, I never went to a museum. All of my visual reference were purely calendars of tractors at my dad's warehouse. And like, I mean, images, religious images in the churches and stuff. But I think the first time that I saw like Guernica painting, I was already 16. So maybe in some areas of knowledge production, you know, there's still like, you know, these cracks or these like kind of places where other individuals can take part or like create knowledge on the side, or not being under so much pressure from, you know, all of these institutions. And I don't know, I was thinking when you were reading, you know, all of these courses that you took in math, is like, wow, it will be great to revisit them, you know, as an artist, you as an artist, you know, Munir, not as a mathematician, but as an artist who revisit, you know, all of these concepts absolutely from the disbelief that you have now. You know, from purely like, okay, what it mean, like logistics, you know, I mean, from an artistic point of view, no? Or how a musician could interpret logic, you know, under which kind of scope, or what that will sound like, I don't know.
And, you know, here is where what we can do, very simple. Like, I mean, just always remind children and young people, don't accept anything in life that has no meaning and no context. Just these simple things. If we just say, you know, protect yourself. Maybe a computer does not have a meaning, but computer does not relate to my life. It's advice that I can use either wisely or I can use as a slave.
Yeah.
And the person decides. But so as not to be a slave, when you talk about, we can tell any young people, remind them, when you talk about life, as much as possible, keep stressing to the person who is talking, you know, I really want to know the meaning of the word you are using. I want to know the context that you really refer to when you talk about what you are talking about. So meaning and context are very simple reminders. And you are not telling them, giving them an alternative context, alternative meaning. You are telling them, you are the source of meaning and context. This is where, again, going back home, like this Australian Aborigine, he said, no, I'm not lost. I can go back home. You know, and back home here is back home as a co-author of meaning and as respecting your context and making sense out of it. I mean, Gramsci, when he was put in jail, he just reflected on all his life and wrote his notes from prison that were amazing, and they are still amazing, because he built his knowledge on reflection and making sense of his life. And we can tell also these stories to children, there is no one who is less than another. No one. As a co-author of meaning, as somebody who makes sense out of one's life, we are all equal, but we are deprived of both. These things were made invisible. So really to change, we do not need a big plan. We do not need an empire of knowledge. All what we need is to reclaim wisdom in life, and wisdom is something that relates all aspects of one's life. Doesn't leave anything in one's life that is part of one's life, and does not consider somebody else's knowledge, which is claimed to be universal and all of that, cannot be mine. It's not mine. Just very simple. It's not yours. So yours is your life and making sense of your life.
Exactly. So thank you very much, Munir. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful, and this is an amazing thought to close our conversation. You know, we are all sources of meaning and co-authors of meaning. So thank you very much for being with us today.
I thank you very much too, and I really appreciate a lot what you are trying to do, and you are connecting the East and the West and the North and the South in a totally different way from those who dominate. And in this sense, not only we are equal as West and East and North and South, but we are equal also as human beings who live as human beings and in communal settings. We are not individuals. It is interesting, in Arabic, we don't have a word for individual. The Arabs in all of their history couldn't create one because they never experienced being alone with no connections. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Asun, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to listen to this conversation and your wisdom, your words. Asun, thank you for putting the focus on him. It has been an amazing conversation. And I think that the way to go back home is the only way. No?
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.